two before the one. Wisdom is water, I'm the daughter of the cannon fodder. Applied knowledge and insight, a born scholar. Look like a martyr to marauders like Tartar. Wise owl slaughter, whack MCs order applauder. Original woman, decipher the womb. Crown of creation, fruit of the planet, earth and the moon.
Welcome to another episode of Wise the Dome TV. Today, I have a very, very, very special guest. It's somebody I've definitely been looking forward to interviewing for a while. Dr. Colita Fairfax of Norfolk State, the great Norfolk State.
That's right.
Thank you for coming and spending some time with us today.
So grateful to you and Brother Shabazz, as I shared with you before, your role and your work are so important in this liberation struggle, especially today. And I just want you to know it is indeed my honor to be with you. Just thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And that means a lot coming from you. It is definitely an honor to have you. And so I definitely appreciate you. So let's get started. I like to ask everybody that comes on at least for the first time, because I feel like our stories are things that can inspire others who are taking a similar path or who've thought about it. But as somebody who has dedicated their lives to the study of African people and our situation and our story, what was it that kind of sparked this in you to take on this endeavor?
So from several different points in my life, and we understand life is truly an evolutionary journey. And so one of the really wonderful hallmarks of my life is my childhood, having parents devoted to the community, devoted to the work that they did. My mother, who is still with us, was a school teacher. She was also very active in the community. She taught private piano. She was active in several organizations in the community, retired as a school teacher. My late father was a pastor with the same church, my home church in Richmond, Virginia, was a professor and seminary dean at the School of Theology, now the Samuel DeWitt Proctor School of Theology at Virginia Union University. My siblings and I grew up on that campus. He's a product of that school, finished in 61. Mother finished Virginia State in 62. I had really no other choice but to be an HBCU. So that's how I got to Howard. But their roles in the community, the way in which they gave back, the way in which they understood the need to build institutions. One of the things that Daddy did was he created a senior center. And this was a multi-functioning senior center. It had community programs. It had different activities and events for senior citizens. It just created such a wonderful way for senior citizens to repurpose and retool themselves, connect with people, and to continue their roles as elders and leaders in the community. The work he did as an advocate is because of Daddy that the bridge connecting all Black Church Hill in Richmond to downtown Richmond, it was named after Dr. King. He led the petition. They were going to name it after somebody obscure. And he said, no, the bridge needs to be named after a leader that we regard to be a leader. So that's just one piece. I had a strong extended family network on both sides. So I'm the product of uncles and aunts and cousins, and then those, what we call those beautiful play, people in our lives who are very much family. And the other piece that really had a tremendous impact on me was my development at Howard University. I was very active in student organization in a grassroots movement called Black United Youth By, and that had a profound impact upon my development. And then as I moved through as a community developer and social worker in Philadelphia, what was distressing was the unpacking trauma that I saw how people experience, largely due to poverty, largely due to indifferent policies impacting their families, their communities, the overwhelming, obscene scarcity of resources and opportunities, protection as people who are supposed to be citizens. So my work in Philadelphia had a profound impact upon my needing to really turn to Black studies. So I really am a product of all that I have shared, but that evolution led me to Black studies, led me to want to learn more and more systemically about our culture, our lived experiences, and how then to be engaged in this thing called healing and people development, right? So that we can continue to push forward in the Black freedom struggle.
Absolutely. And not only do we appreciate you, we appreciate the community and the village that allowed you to be here with us, you know. And you mentioned Virginia State and Virginia Union. We take our daughters on these HBCU tours, and we've been to Virginia Union and Virginia State many a times to be just to, you know, visit the campus, and I love them both, you know.
Yes.
And it is funny now because my daughters now, they're 5 and 8, and they're already talking, hey, HB, that's where I'm going, an HBCU. So, you know.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I love it. I love it. And growing up, we didn't live that far from Virginia Union University. Mother still doesn't live that far. So we were on that campus throughout the week. And so just understanding the synergy between campus and community, the connection, and how each entity informs one another. And so it just was something so profoundly impactful upon my sensibilities as a Black woman. Just understanding that in HBCU, and, you know, Du Bois has written about this, Vincent Harding has written about this, you know, is not just a degree granting institution. It is a community intellectual institution. And I think people have forgotten about that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it was interesting just to be on the Virginia Union campus and to see even I believe Booker T. Washington had ties to Virginia Union. And when you look at when we go on these tours and we see these plaques and you see the names of all these great people that have ties to the school, whether they went or they you know, worked there, or I mean, it's amazing. The list is long, and it's a great, we have to definitely appreciate our institutions. You wrote a paper, an essay, and which is amazing, and entitled "In the Need to Be Since 1619: Trauma and Anti-Blackness." And you stated the absence of including historically accurate African pre-enslavement cultural traditions coupled with African cultural reality in America creates flawed analysis. And you also very eloquently stated that the daily systemic and violent assaults upon the psyche, cultural integrity, family structure, spiritual, metaphysical, conceptual systems, organizational roles, and institutions require more analysis with recommended best community practices. I thought that was very profound. If you can talk to us about what this anti-Black cultural violence is, and what it means is historically and how it affects us today.
I appreciate that question. So if we understand anything about America, America started off as such a wicked enterprise. It started off with the genocide of indigenous people, and then engaged in a global kidnapping franchise of African people, who then was, as Dr. Marimba Ani would say, made to work for a demon, and was just so brutalized for centuries as this enterprise grew into what would become America. And what is so problematic about it is, and obvious, is that even in the sacred documents of America, you know, African people are notoriously absent. And our Black freedom struggle is just not a part of this thing called freedom and, you know, democracy and liberty. Indigenous people are not included in those documents. So America's development was absolutely and predicated upon the inhumanity of African people, which is the neglect and non-recognition of Black bodies, Black thought, Black culture, Black philosophy, Black intellect, Black social organizations, the fact that Black people are the original ancient people on the planet is just not even something that we even assert ourselves. And if you then understand America through, of course, the heinous period of enslavement, but Brother Sabraz, what would occur after the Civil War during the Reconstruction period would be this assimilationist movement. And we don't talk too much about this, about between 1880 and 1930. There was this assimilationist movement in institutions, in public history, in the way in which social institutions that would then respond or supposed to respond to the human condition would then posture themselves, particularly those, social work agencies, those organizations that were working with immigrant people from Europe, would posture themselves as catalyst of assimilating people into whiteness, accepting America as a white country, learning Anglo-Saxon traditions, Anglo-Saxon ways of understanding being, what education looks like, right? What family is supposed to look like, what communities are supposed to look like. And anything that was not within an Anglo-Saxon framework then was not deemed American. So even Europeans coming from their countries were not necessarily encouraged to continue certain practices and customs that were not Americanized. Definitely that was the case for indigenous people. Absolutely no question. This was a part of the uniting of America under this banner of a nationalistic white identity, which absolutely meant anything having to do with African people, anything having to do with your Blackness, you just simply did not fit into that paradigm. And so even if you are a white person who sees this, and you may even decide, okay, I see humanity in other people. I mean, that's just not the point, because the national identity then it becomes whiteness, and anything closer, right, to whiteness fits, match, and anything that is closer then to Africanity, to your Blackness, doesn't match, does not fit into the paradigm of what America is as a civilization predicated on all whiteness. And so if we then continue the journey, we see this in how public history textbooks are written, how popular literary figures and literary texts are highlighted. We see this when we understand forms of government and government functioning at the state level, the locality level. We see this in all forms of social policy. I teach my students, tell me what was a great social policy, in the 30s throughout this time. You may have one or two pockets, but let's talk about how social policy has been used in a predatory fashion, right, upon Black people. And of course, you have concomitant, organizations such as the Ku Klux Klan, the Council of White Knights. You have the Daughters of the American Revolution, the Sons of the Confederacy. So there was this very organized, well-titulated network to ensure that whiteness would be the national identity. And in that then, there's no room whatsoever for Blackness. And we see that then, even now, because segregation, physical residential segregation has blurred some lines, because you have now, in integration within the past 60 years, you see some different things in our communities that are a response then to the fallout of how anti-Blackness is psychological warfare, the warfare upon your culture, upon your identity, upon the very fashion by which you go through your day-to-day life. And it is just so anti-Black, you don't even realize it. So when we don't have time, for example, to call an elder,
Right.
which is a part, so a part of our culture. This is something small when we don't have time, to send that email about the community. We don't make time to seek out the business to keep the money in the community. We don't fight against the way in which residential housing has so crippled, ways in which we're able to corral resources, when the very essence, right, of what we listen to, who are experts and who are not. I could go on and on, but the notion then is that when we as a people continue to function under anti-blackness, we see maladaptive patterns, and we see a spiritual alienation that is very foreign to us, because again, as the ancient original people on the planet, we have always been spiritual, because our connection to God, our connection to the ancestors, was always a part of our culture, our being, and it's our life force.
Right.
It's the way in which we're able to do phenomenal metaphysical things. And so when we see maladaptive behavioral patterns, these are two forms of anti-blackness.
Yeah, that's powerful, and we see our people internalize it and begin to perpetuate it. It seems as if it's a well-oiled machine that's on autopilot right now. One of my favorite quotes is Sada Shakur, where she said, people get used to anything. The less you think about your oppression, the more your tolerance for it grows.
Yeah.
After a while, people just like the oppression, the normal state of things. But to become free, you have to be acutely aware of being a slave, meaning you have to, I know, and this is part of the reality that African people have to face in today's society, from the time we were brought over, and just the idea that the things that are natural to us, our culture, the way we speak, now people are doing more studies on, different African traditional religions and African American diasporic, like Hoodoo Heritage Month. People are doing more academic studies on that. People are doing more academic studies on AAVE and other things and we're finding that these aren't just, they're not what white society told us they were. They are systems that are rich in value and orient us back to Africa as well, which I feel like it's still an ongoing effort for us to, disconnect ourselves with Africa and consider ourselves American in the sense where not just American in citizenship, but American in ideology, American as, and like I remember listening. I think I was listening to, I think Dr. Carr spoke about it, where he was talking about the idea that our ancestors, their wildest dreams was to be American is ahistorical.
Absolutely.
But a lot of times our history is framed that way, where it's like these are our aspirations, just to be American citizens, and it's I know, right? And it's a wild concept to think, but many have internalized that.
Yeah, so if I can jump in here. So I do cringe when I see folks, beautiful people, right, who have achieved a degree or perhaps a position, make that statement. And in all of the narratives I've read, when our people were enslaved, and they are available online, because in the 1930s, for example, there was this Works Progress Administrative Project where people interviewed African people who had been enslaved. And although I think some of the responses with some of the interviews may have been shaded a bit because these were white people interviewing our ancestors, still though, if you read the narratives, and I do include some in a book I edited, those sentiments are not there. What we do read is the importance of freedom. What we do read is the importance of people wanting freedom to be left alone, to be able to do for self, to be with family. What we do read are ways in which the system of slavery, Brother Shabazz, was just so incomprehensibly brutal and sadistic. So part of the challenge for me is the lack of deep study that I think many people engage in. And it takes years, it does, but it also means you have to be intentional about what you're going to read and what you're going to study. And you've got to read our scholars. I tell my students at NSU, you need to quote our intellectuals in our genealogy. And we need to be real clear about reading those voices from the 19th century. Very powerful, very powerful, because they're so informative. And I'm active in the NABSW, and there is just something I want to read. There's an African proverb which asks, how do we go about seeking a path to our journey? An elder might respond, go and ask the birds and the rocks, or go and learn from your ancestors who still walk the path. So going back to those 19th century voices are incredibly powerful, because you're learning from people who essentially survived that heinous system of human chattel, and then where they are with their consciousness. And it's a beautiful place to connect with and to learn what your path should look like.
Absolutely. And like with that, like just to kind of stay there just for a second, when we study the anti-Black cultural violence, and how important is it to frame it in the context of us living in what most would call a settler colonial state? And the reason I ask is because it seems like the link between Black cultural violence and enslavement, the building of a settler colonial society, it all has a genetic link in this country, and it's often ignored. And so, like, you know, like the alt-right response to the 1619 project, which they call the 1776 project, right? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. So again, anti-Black violence is not just the physical force that's used by systems such as the criminal justice system, the police system, corrections, public welfare, you know, violently taking children from impoverished Black families, or violently jailing fathers under the child support enforcement system. Those absolutely are anti-Black violent systems. We, though, should also be clear that social policy have been equally predatory in its anti-Black posturing over generations. The way in which public welfare, now temporary assistance to needy families, so violently insists upon impoverished Black women working for free, essentially, so that she can receive her benefit. We should be clear in how we see anti-Blackness in the number of in the number of mental health commitments of Black men without their consent. These are involuntary commitments. We should be clear about anti-Blackness in policy when we examine ways in which localities, local governments, will take community development block grants, money that's meant for what? Community development, which from my interpretation means people development, but they will use that money, and they're given wide discretion to use that money for physical infrastructure. So people wonder, well, where does the money doesn't come to the community. Money doesn't come to us. So we've got churches and agencies out here doing the heavy lifting. We've got drill teams. We've got rites of passage programs. We've got people coaching. We have people doing the heavy lifting, and no money whatsoever comes really from local government, state government. We continue really to fend for ourselves. That those are measures and indicators of anti-Black policies. And it is a continuation from how America developed as a settler colony. And just for the viewers, a settler colony is the domination of one culture forcefully settling on what is already occupied territory. And so when you want to talk about, America was discovered, then you are obliterating the violent reality of what happened, right? when America would form. And the challenge for us who were in, Black studies, in the social sciences, is, America has never really meant to atone for it, because the capitalistic structure is the makeup of America. It is the political economy of America. And so to atone would mean a transformation, a drastic, actually disruption, right, of the political economy, and people in power are not going to have that. So there are intentional reasons for why the way in which we understand anti-Blackness is absolutely different, because people do not want any disruption to business as usual. During the pandemic, when we kept hearing people indicate they wanted to return to normal, my position was, I don't.
Right, mine too.
I don't.
Who has normal been good for, right?
Right, exactly, precisely. I'm thinking you really want to go back to it, and again, as someone who understands, and I pray, I'm very connected to the God of my understanding, to ancestors. I'm saying again, my belief, my position. I am saying that I believe was an opportunity for change. That was the universe providing an opportunity for something different. And people in power, as usual, believe that they are God. And their position is no, God is money, God is my power, God is my privilege, and we ain't changing nothing, because I want my children to inherit exactly what I have laid out for them. No, we're not changing. We're not sharing. We're not going to ensure that resources are provided. The denial of resources is another form of anti-Blackness. The denial of protection, another form, of anti-Blackness. So I think we've got to think wider and broader, about what anti-Blackness looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. And so now I kind of want to get into just the idea and the topic of Black studies a little bit. You went to Howard, Rutgers, and Temple. And now, when you were at Temple, were you in the program that Dr. Molefi Asante created?
Yeah, I was in African American Studies, Black Studies. Yes.
Awesome.
So he was my professor. Yeah.
Oh, he was? Awesome. So let's go to kind of add a little bit to this question then. First, we'll go there. How was it studying under Dr. Molefi Asante, just through all your years of education and ending up at Temple in a doctoral program for Africana Studies? Obviously, there's not many in the country. And so how was that experience?
In the 90s, it was a phenomenal spiritual, life-altering experience. The department was still quite new at Temple University. We were still we were the first, and at that time, the only department in higher ed in the world with a PhD program in Black Studies,
Wow.
what is called African American Studies, and studying under so many great uh, scholars, including Dr. Nate Norman, Professor Sonia Sanchez, who
Wow.
would come to lecture, Dr. Malefi Asante's wife, the late Dr. Kariamu Welsh. I could go, I could, Bobby Seale, legendary Bobby Seale once came to lecture, Dr. Edward Said. I could go on and on.
Wow.
It was an absolute
wow.
Game changer, because you are essentially being trained to think very differently about social phenomena, about your culture, about history, and then how to apply it in an approach that you believe best suits where you want to go in the liberation freedom struggle. We were trained to understand that your training is not for you. Your training is for what you're going to do in the Black freedom struggle. At the time when I was there, we had a Pan-African community program, HACCP. And so people from the community were able to come and receive an education. They were able to take classes.
Amazing.
And it was absolutely amazing. Mrs. Muriel Felder headed that program. So it was just another level of intellectual, spiritual, academic affirmation of my training at Howard.
Right.
And pushing the boundaries of what a Black perspective is to that of what an Africana perspective is, continuing the continuum of knowledge. And so it was a phenomenal moment in my life. I a young woman living in Philadelphia, I shall never forget. And that's where I met so many great people, Danny Black and Greg Carr, Kamathi, and so many beautiful, great people. Yeah.
Awesome. Amazing. And so when we think about Africana studies or Black studies, and we think about people like Dr. John Henry Clark and Schomburg, and the campus takeover at Cornell, and so many events and great people that contributed to this framework. What would you say the legacy of Black studies or Africana studies is, and why is it still important in 2023?
Yes, one of the wonderful hallmarks of when I was at Temple was visiting the Charles Blockson collection, and he was still living, and he was such a larger than life figure, and so sitting at his feet, learning about just the thousands and thousands and thousands of artifacts that he had. I mean, he was the supreme bibliophile, and going to New York to sit at the feet of John Henry Clark and Marimba Ani and Mama Shashi McIntyre, and I mean these just heavy figures who absolutely put their lives on the line to push for the freedom to be an intellectual for the community. It was just so invaluable to be in the audience listening to Dr. Clark. And when I met him, he had lost his sight, but that did not at all deter his forcefulness to educate those of us who were just so blessed to share the same physical space in this universe with him. I learned that Black studies is an intellectual paradigm in and of itself that utilizes African philosophies and traditions, different historical narratives, different ways in which we understand ourselves, ways of knowing and being, ways of social, community, economic, political formation, in order for us to then find ways to continue those traditions and apply them in the everyday thinking and being of who we are, in order to be engaged in the freedom to really be African, and to understand that then for the greater good of the community, and what it means then to have that knowledge then and apply it. And in the work that I do, which really has to do with how we think about healing, how we think about togetherness as a community, how do we, create those systems of human transformation as Black people? How do we attend right to trauma and anti-blackness in ways that are meaningful to us is what Black studies is. And so I struggle a bit when folks depart and they talk about other sensational topics, and I guess that has its place. That's not where I am, but I guess that has its place. I always go back to, and I've learned to ask this question more and more, Brother Shabazz. Mama Sonia Sanchez always asks, does it free us? Do it free us? Right. What we doing? Right. And the older I get, you grow less tolerant of what you realize is commercial, sensational. It's just, okay, it's fun, but the question is, do it for it.
It's exactly. And I talk about that often, and it's never to necessarily come off being rude, but it's a lot of it's just entertainment. And it just kind of even reminds me of when Booker T. Washington was at Hampton, and he was telling people like, what's the purpose of you studying Greek or Latin? He didn't say Mama Sanchez said how that would free us, but in essence, that's what he was getting at, right? Like, what's the point? And so that definitely is a powerful sentiment. And I'm glad you kind of gave people an overview of what Black Studies is, because a lot of times I think people may assume that it's just about history, although that is part of it, but it is more than history. It's political. It's dealing with our everyday way of life, our psyche, our mental, our, like you said, our spiritual and metaphysical concepts. All of this can be under this umbrella. Although history is extremely important, it's extremely rewarding, but the idea is something that we can implement in our daily lives, and also that we can add to the freedom and liberation of African people at home and abroad. It's kind of staying on that just a little bit. As a, I saw you.
Can I jump in? Yeah,
sure thing. So
just because I study history, I'm not a historian in the in the academic enterprise, but my need to study history is incredibly important. Why? Because I've got to study what our people did to respond to a situation, a political, economic fight, a war, a battle, in order for me to then get a sense of how we duplicate then their response today. So there's just no way, if you're understanding Black studies, that you would divorce yourself from studying the history of your people and even the history of your oppressor. Because all is revealed when you study that history. But it's not just studying what occurred in the past. It is then to pull out our response, and then how then do we duplicate that, especially in this 21st century moment where we see the way in which our people are living, and some of it is just so profane. And I think that's very important to know, regardless of whatever concentration you may find yourself, what your interest may be about your people. You've got to, and I go back to the quote, go and learn from your ancestors who still
Mm.
walk the path. I just, that is how we stay connected to our intellectual genealogy, and that makes Black studies different from every other field of study. Yeah.
And that's amazing, because like, whenever I study, whenever I read those that came before us, whether it's thoughts and opinions from Garvey, or different books on Malcolm, or different Ida B. Wells, or W.E.B. Du Bois, it's like you can feel them talking to you, like you can feel the presence of them and everything that they stood for, speaking to you. And it's such a incredible experience for those who I couldn't live a life where I didn't study the history of my people. I could.
I could. And not only that, what is so powerful is that at every historical epoch or historical era, Black people have showed how connected they were to God. In doing what seemed insurmountable.
Right.
It was their faith in the God of their understanding that provided them with that power to be able to go through the fire in ways that are phenomenal. And so that's a part of culture. Right. So when then there is a disconnect from the God of our understanding, the God of the universe, in what we do, then then the question becomes, well, then what's happening with culture?
Right. And
because God is absolutely a part of that, and the connection then with those ancestors whose paths we're walking in. And I think that is something we don't really emphasize and embrace as much as we should.
Oh, absolutely. I think and for a lot of people, it may be even taboo to talk about,
That's right.
Yeah. You know how that goes. But having gone to Howard, having and being a professor at Norfolk State.
That's right.
I love Norfolk State as well. When we think about what HBCUs have meant to our communities historically, what would you say the primary motivations and circumstances were that led to the founding of our HBCUs?
Freedom. Freedom. So HBCUs were not those who were founded by white philanthropists, during and after the Civil War, before the Civil War, and those founded by the community after the Civil War, and wherever the community is. It was about the freedom to be, the freedom to be, and the freedom to do it from one's cultural and intellectual position to the rest of the world. So this notion of how then do I learn how to be free, and what do I do as a free person? And so the learning then is so that you can continue to be engaged in freedom. The freedom then to live on your cultural terms, the freedom to earn your bread on your cultural terms, the freedom to raise your family on your cultural terms, the freedom to have their business, the freedom to create the inventions, the freedom to create new pedagogical techniques, the freedom to create new ways of healing, the freedom, to create ways to attend to disease and pathologies, medical pathologies and illness. All of that predicated upon freedom. And on top of that, then you're in community. When I talk to people about HBCUs are not HBCUs and then the community. HBCUs are community institutions, are community organizations. They're not separate. They're not separate. And so HBCUs then continue to educate the community, pulling the community along, informing the community, of information. And we largely still do that, although caveat for me is HBCUs need to remember that we have a responsibility to educate everybody and not just folk who are paying tuition. We have a responsibility to educate everybody in the community, and to be in community, and to ensure that we are providing the intellectual space, right? And we're providing the intellectual opinions. We are providing information, we've got to make sure that our schools continue to do that, continue to be that to community. Yeah. So we should look different, right, from white schools. And I think there's been this sense of over the past few decades, we've got to begin to look like and function and feel like white schools. And I've seen some of that, and it is not pretty. It is not pretty.
Yeah, I've seen some of that as well. You also, and I wanted to, this is definitely something that I wanted to ask you about, because as someone who loves history, I found the topic fascinating, and not just that, it's important just due to the fact that it is a big part of our story. You wrote a book entitled The African Experience in Colonial Virginia, Essays on the 1619 Arrival and the Legacy of Slavery. And when we think about how important places like Chesapeake Bay and Charleston were, and how so many Africans came through these different places, this is, in my opinion, an amazing work to even take on. And if you can give us a little insight on like the history kind of slavery in Virginia, and about the 20 and odd and some of the first Africans that come through Virginia.
Yeah, so let me go back just a little bit too. So I live in Hampton, and so Hampton over the past few years, because of it claims 1610 as its founding, which at the time was Elizabeth City County, named after Queen Elizabeth. And at the time too, there were indigenous people who were called Kickatan, who were slaughtered, which led to apparently the founding of Elizabeth City County. And so I served on the City of Hampton's 2010 commission when it celebrated its 400. But my role there was to remind them of what happened to the indigenous people, and also then to remind them then of the contributions of African people, starting or including the landing of African people 1619, and then what would happen with the Civil War in 1861, when three men, Black men, rendered themselves to Benjamin Butler of the Union Army, and he named them contraband, and so he would not give them back to the slave owner, John B. Carey, who came to get them because his position was, Virginia had succeeded from the Union, so they're contraband. Well, what happened in 1861, thousands of African people got wind or learned, because you know how we do, we shared, got wind of this, and thousands of them converged to Fort Monroe, which we call Freedom, which was called Freedom Fortress.
Wow.
And then some years later, Hampton University would be birthed, 1868. So Hampton, the city of Hampton, is a very interesting place. What also occurred, or what is included then, is the landing of African people at Point Comfort, 1619, a part of Elizabeth City County, present day Hampton. And I always caution people that we know African people, ancient African people, were seafaring. So we need to be clear that our history doesn't start with 1619 or 1565 in Florida. But if you then provide this interesting framework that in the Virginia colony, which would become a part of America, we see how then it's framed with regards to the quote unquote entrance of African people. In the book that you mentioned that I edited, there are very different chapters
Essays,
in the book. Yeah, essays. I just want to read a little bit just to share with our community the perspective that I'm offering. After the Aboriginal people, the Kickatan, were slaughtered in 1610, ushering in Elizabeth City County, other Aboriginal people would have their existence and cultural way of life tested over and over in the colony, such as the Powhatan, the Mattaponi, the Pamunkey, the Chickahominy, the Potomac, the Chesapeake, the Rappahannock, the Appomattox, the Nansemond, the Cherokee, and so many others. The Anglo-Powhatan War devastated those people, those villages. And so the Aboriginal people would find their way of life upended, and many of their people enslaved. And it should not be forgotten that they were the first group of people enslaved in the Virginia colony. Wow. So I make that notation. And then when I talk about our ancestors, I write that the Africans who disembarked the ship White Lion were from the Angola region. Their ethnicity could have been Kamundu or Kikongo. They were skilled people in farming, herding, textile weaving, blacksmithing, and musicality. They were a spiritual people with a philosophy, a worldview of family, rituals, beliefs, ideology. They may or may not have been exposed to Christianity, may have been baptized as Christians. Wisdom and art were esteemed highly, and children were cherished. These Africans hailed from nation states that evolved politically, religious, and military institutions. These societies were hierarchical, well organized, and those had many skills in areas such as trade, metalworking, animal husbandry, and agriculture. They used proverbs in the form of Anansi tales, passed down through generations as Brer Fox and rabbit and folk stories. They created the string box-like device, which we call banjo. And women were leaders, as evidence of the historic figure Queen Anne Njinga or Nzinga Mbande, who lived from 1583 to 1663, who ruled over Ndongo and Matamba, whose outstanding accomplishments and decades-long reign was comparable to that of Elizabeth I of England. And in fact, millions of Africans enslaved in Brazil were from Angola, as the Africans who disembarked the ships White Lion in August 1619 and Treasurer in 1620 at Point Comfort, present-day Hampton, were from Ndongo, Matamba, and Congo kingdoms in Angola. And I have citation for these. And I just a little bit to just end. The presence of African people is not only due to the expansion of the colony as a settler project, but it speaks volumes to what they contributed. And although the Africans who landed in 1619 originated from Angola, the forced migration of African people transferred centuries of knowledge in mathematics and religion, governance, military, and societal organization frameworks, creative productions in literacy and movement, such as the ring shop and the cakewalk, medicine and science, astronomy, metallurgy, architecture, engineering, and navigation. Many ancient societies in Africa engaged in seafaring expeditions, settling in parts of the Americas. So,
amazing. First off, we can listen to you read the whole book. You know what I mean?
But you have no idea the labor of love. And so the idea is when the Commonwealth of Virginia and the city of Hampton decided, right, to commemorate the landing of African people 1619 to 2019, I was a part of that. I was a part of the effort, and I tell you, it drove me a bit crazy, because what many of the community leaders and I had in mind was we really wanted to duplicate very much what the National Council of Negro Women had done for years under Dorothy Height. We wanted that Black family reunion, Brother Shabazz. You know, we wanted the discussions, we wanted the celebration of culture, we wanted the freedom See, we wanted that. We wanted the businesses. We wanted the economic engine. We wanted planning, strategy sessions.
Right.
We wanted that, and we were fought because we did not hold the resources. We were fought, and so the state wanted to, and it did. It used this interesting theme called the evolution of democracy, and we're thinking, yeah, okay,
right.
Right.
So, and if you can, like, kind of explain that a little bit, like, how did they, like, in what ways were they fighting it? Because it's kind of goes to the essay and the conversation that you wrote, and the essay and the conversation we had about it earlier, about this attack on anything African, whether it's the history, the culture, our ideas, our thoughts. Like, why would a historical project such as this be fought? I mean, we know why. That's rhetorical.
We know why.
Yeah.
So where I live in what is called Hampton Roads, 7 cities in the 757, and a part of that is Williamsburg and historic Jamestown. And Jamestown has always claimed that African people landed at Jamestown. This is a part of their tourism industry. This is a part of how they maintain this narrative of being the birthplace of everything, quote unquote, America, which would include then this narrative that African people settled at Jamestown, which is in Williamsburg, where Hampton is where the water is, right, where the entry point of Point Comfort. So, and of course, for decades, city of Hampton, being a white city, wasn't interested in highlighting, anything about African people, about Black people, right? And so when the state and the city decided to plan this commemoration, it was very frustrating in that the state, as far as I'm concerned, diluted the discussion and intent to focus on the Africans, our ancestors. The dilution is that they created these other competing committees and themes. Oh my gosh, Brother Shabazz, they created a committee about the arrival of white women in 1620. I mean, really. They created a committee. Oh, check this. They created a committee that highlighted, listen, the first Thanksgiving at the Berkeley plantation. I thought, I cannot make this up. I can't make it up. So, and their thing was, oh, we were really the first, not Massachusetts, as if any of it is something you would want to claim.
Right.
And then they had this really interesting committee that focused on the House of Burgesses as the first seat of government. 1619 will understand the economy of the House of Burgesses would be the kidnapping and enslavement, right, of African people and indigenous people. I cannot make this up. So they poured in resources in these other entities under this umbrella of 1619, 2019, the evolution of democracy. I cannot tell you how absolutely disrespectful.
Yeah.
And because anti-blackness is a non-recognition of Black humanity, of Black agency, of Black culture. I cannot. So you had all of these competing narratives, all to make sure that Jamestown would stay on top as the birthplace of democracy. And so our efforts, and I co-chaired the City of Hampton Commission with Lieutenant Colonel retired Claude Van III, my boy from the community. We did not have the resource support to really push forth the vision that I mentioned earlier for community engagement and awareness. Yeah.
Two things come to mind. It's insane to
it is insane.
look at Jamestown the beginning of a settler colonial state that created itself through genocide of Native American and indigenous people and enslavement of Africans as a democracy. All right, that is insane. The second, whenever you were reading that excerpt from the book, the first thing that popped in my mind, this is obviously something that we know because of our love for our people and the study of our history.
Yeah.
But the idea that all of these skills that we came with, right? Yeah. In a lot of cases, eventually as our enslavement or the institution of slavery began to evolve, different nations would seek out certain peoples because they knew that they were good at certain things.
Yeah.
And that's so right. But do you remember, like, it was a month or two ago where there was a whole debate on the media whether like we should be thankful for our enslavement because we learned valuable skills? Like, I could not believe that. I mean, like, what were your thoughts whenever you heard that?
It revealed to me not only how insane some of our people are, but it revealed to me, and now this new strategy of ensuring that those of us who are experts are nullified, because there's this other narrative that is competing, even though they're lies, that should be also adjudicated. And part of this fight in terms of public school curricula is that with Black studies ascending the way that it has, it then removes ultimate authority in the academy from history, and history as an academic discipline is part and parcel with the capitalistic structure. And so it has absolutely challenged history, right, as an academic, as the chief leading academic intellectual discipline in the academy. And so you're no longer the expert. You're no longer the expert. You have other people now who are the experts, documented experts in our culture, our history, but also informing it in a way that it informs who we are, so that we can again continue to be about this liberation work. And so that is the pushback, and it just tells me how absolutely insane, but it also tells me the level of trauma that collectively we are in. What I tried to do in the edited book is to include essays that would have people think wider and broader about 1619, and more so about our memory, our healing, ways in which we should think about family, including slave narratives from our ancestors, was important because we need to read what they reported. We need to, this is coming from them. We, again, going back to how they understood, how they experienced, right? The heinous, most inhumane system, and yes, survived, but how they remembered that pain. And there's something appropriate and sacred when you're reading about what ancestors, went through. So, and even when we consider the occupations that Black women still serve in, which are largely service, are very much connected to decades and decades of us working in service industry, very similar to what we did when we were enslaved, and even how we should think very differently about founders, because there are Black founders.
Right.
So each essay really helps the reader to think very broadly about who we are now with knowledge, and how we can think about ourselves very differently throughout the historical trajectory of America.
Oh,
That was
yeah.
the intent. Yeah.
Yeah, and awesome. I'm going to definitely the link was in the description. Make sure everybody get that and buy it and read it and engage it. Not just read it. I think a lot of times, I mean, it's great to read for your leisure, but
Yeah.
it's important to actually engage the work. Take notes.
Yeah.
Remember people's names. Remember dates,
Yeah.
because this is how you become a part of that history in
Absolutely.
2023.
Absolutely.
And one quick thing I wanted to ask you before we go, and also, again, I definitely appreciate your time.
My
I
pleasure.
appreciate all the work that you've done and that you do. And like I said, again, the community and the village that brought you to us,
Yes.
we are appreciative of it all. When it
We are.
comes to you and I, both know that there was a certain time when woke, the word woke was was something that was just in our community.
Yeah.
And it meant that you knew what time it was. You weren't sleeping when it came to
That's right.
this system of white supremacy and white hegemony. We knew
That's right.
that you were studying, that you were studying your history. And now, what are your thoughts on? It seems like, especially media,
Yeah.
how they have hijacked something that was ours and used it against us. Like, what do you think about just that whole process and idea?
This is what they do.
Mm-hmm.
This is what the oppressor does. It codifies something about your culture and it demonizes it. This is what they do. They follow the path of their ancestors really well.
Right.
They do. They don't depart whatsoever. They are very clear about that. So if you consider Senator Patrick Moynihan's report about the Black family in the 60s, his misrepresenting and mischaracterizing the roles of Black women, the roles of Black men, demonizing Black women. It is a similar example when Parliament Funkadelic, came out to truly transform and push the boundaries of consciousness, of image, of who we are, of our identity. They were absolutely, demonized. So this is not new. This isn't new. What is new is the amount of attention that we pay the oppressor. And Toni Morrison taught us all of that are distractions. Don't give into the distractions because they're going to do what they do. But we ought to be doing what we should be doing in our community. Brother, there is just so much work. The work is not being done. So there should be no Black person should say they're bored. No Black person should say they don't know where to put their money in. No Black person should not be involved in some effort in the community where they live. No Black person should not be connected to an organization. No Black person should not be connected to elders, attending, seeing to their needs. No Black person should not be reading the work of our great minds. No Black person should not be getting the healing and the intervention. No Black family should not be getting the healing and the intervention. There should not be a Black community where there aren't our cultural assets, our museums, our bookstores, places of gathering, readings, discussions, coming together to plan. This should be happening every day. So when we do not engage in that work, rescuing our people out of the fire, building situations where our homeless people, our veterans, our mentally our challenged brothers and sisters, with certain physical disabilities. I mean, there is just so much work. And the fact that we're too busy to do this work tells you how distracted we are, and we're caught up in capitalism. So we are feeding the very system
that's destroying us.
Is absolutely, we're feeding it. The amount of attention paid to celebrities, the amount of attention paid to entertainers, it is just irrational.
Right.
The amount of attention paid to Deion Sanders, who clearly has a commercialized, because he's a capitalist, he has a commercialized idea of thinking he can just miraculously make a white school,
an HBCU,
a historical school grounded in the Black freedom, liberation, intellectual paradigm. So that he himself did not get that.
Right.
So the great challenge for us in this moment, I believe, is to be there for our people, to help them recalibrate their Africanity, recalibrate and understand how they can prioritize their healing, prioritize their mental and cultural wellness, prioritize family. When you get a degree, you get some modicum of an income. Your first priority is your family. There should not be you not wanting to be there for family. And I understand, we got some challenge, but there still should be a priority to family. There should be ways in which you are pouring into the community where you live. There should be some institution you are building. There should be some agency you're giving to. We absolutely are in this Black, the Black freedom struggle is a continental struggle. We really are in a battle for our Africanity and for our righteous minds. Really, we really are.
Yes, we are. And I love that, recalibrate your Africanity. I think that is definitely something that our people need to keep in their forefront. Don't lose yourself. Don't allow what this system has done to make you doubt your own humanity. Understand what you deserve and what type of work needs to be done. And we all have a lane. We all have a role. You don't have to do everything. That's what people got to realize. Understand, find out what you're good at, and then lend that to the community. And if everybody did that, we'd definitely be moving in the right direction.
Dr. Clark said it best: do what you do best and do it for your people. And do it for your people. And I just cannot imagine living your life without your people around you.
Me neither. I wouldn't want it.
Exactly. Exactly. So you this is the battle we are in. Yeah.
Indeed. Well, with that said, again, Dr. Colita Fairfax, my sister.
Yes, my brother. Thank you.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you online, but now, to be able to talk to you here and just get some great and valuable insights. It's truly an honor. So thank you.
The honor is mine, and thank you. Peace be unto you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.